Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Juliana Torres, and I'm the Associate Director of Admissions and Diversity at Roger Williams University School of Law. I am so happy to have two of our alums here today to speak about their experiences clerking, along with our Associate Director of Career Development, Christopher Gerlica. Before we begin, I'd like to read a land acknowledgement. As we begin our program today, I just want to take a moment to reflect on the lands on which we reside. We are coming from many places, and we want to acknowledge the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of Indigenous and Native peoples who have been here since time immemorial, and to recognize that we must continue to build our solidarity and kinship with Native peoples across the Americas and across the globe. Roger Williams University School of Law is located in Bristol, Rhode Island, and so we acknowledge and we honor the Narragansett and Pokanoket people, as well as Sowams, the original name of the land on which our campus resides. We also acknowledge that this country would not exist if not for the free enslaved labor of Black people, and we recognize that the town of Bristol and the very land on which our campus resides has benefited significantly from the trade of enslaved people from Africa. The economy of New England, of Rhode Island, and more specifically of Bristol, was built from wealth generated through the triangle trade of human lives. During this time of ongoing national reckoning with our history of slavery and the disparate treatment of Black people, we honor the legacy of the African diaspora and the Black lives, knowledge, and skills stolen due to violence and white supremacy. As we gather here today, the movement for justice and liberation is building in our country, and we are witnessing the power of the people. Yet many are still being met with violence and even being killed, while others actively work to stand in the way of progress. As upholders of justice, our hope is to become agents of change for members of our society who have been met with violence, physical, mental, emotional, through our privilege. And as upholders of justice, we believe that our students, who soon will become practitioners of law, can be and already are agents of change ourselves. Thank you so much, and thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Juliana. We're very excited to have two lovely alums, Leticia Pimentel, who graduated in 2014, and Marco Collemi, who graduated in 2021. Who are here to both talk about what they're currently doing and how doing a judicial clerkship after they graduated helped in their career path. I'd like to start with Leticia to introduce herself and what she's doing currently.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. If you're listening in, congratulations, first of all, for having an acceptance from Roger Williams. I, as Chris said, graduated in 2014, and right now I'm an associate at the law firm Robinson and Cole. We are mostly based in New England. I work out of our Providence office, and I'm in the Energy, Environment, and Telecommunications practice group. Most of my practice is energy law related. And I'm constantly before the Energy Facility Siting Board or the Public Utilities Commissions, which is essentially like the judges of my world, which is, utility regulation. Should I start sort of a little bit of my pathway to how I ended up here, or we'll jump to that later?
Yeah. Marco, if you want to say what you're doing now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marco. As Chris stated, I graduated in 2021, so not too long ago, even though it feels like yesterday for me. So currently, I'm an assistant prosecutor with the Essex County Prosecutor's Office in New Jersey. I am from New Jersey, and I did attend Roger Williams a few years back. And when I was in law school, to be honest, I had no idea I would end up as a prosecutor or even involved in criminal law. Chris and I were actually just speaking a few moments ago before we got on about how my path in law school seemed like it was going to be more of a business path, but I do think that I ended up in the position I am actually because of my clerkship, which we'll touch more upon once we go ahead.
Yeah, actually, Marco, if you wouldn't mind stating what kind of judicial clerkship you had after you graduated?
Sure. Yeah, so after graduating from Roger Williams, I started my clerkship right away. I believe I started in August because I remember studying for the bar and then taking the bar, and then I went right into my clerkship, which is also another great reason why the clerkship is great, but we'll get to that in a second. So I did a criminal clerkship. I worked for a criminal judge in Essex County, the same county, same courthouse, same building as I'm in now as a prosecutor. And I do think that the position I have nowadays as a prosecutor certainly resulted out of my clerkship. Specifically as a criminal clerk, I was actually in drug court in New Jersey. They have a drug court program. I'm sure other states and jurisdictions also have the same. So it was a criminal clerkship. However, it was more focused on rehabilitative aspects. So it's a little bit different than a regular criminal clerkship. But it was definitely good because I'm a strong believer in the more exposure and the more things you learn, certainly could aid you, especially in the practice of law, if not in the practice of law in your general life.
Great, thank you. Leticia, how about your clerkships?
Yes. So, not intentionally, but I did end up clerking for 4 years after law school, which is not, the traditional route, but it worked really well for me for many reasons. But when I first graduated, I clerked in the trial courts in Rhode Island. So I clerked out of Newport, Rhode Island. Actually, I was assigned to one of the counties. And yeah, I got to work on both the civil and the criminal calendar in Newport, which was a lot of fun. Definitely a range of areas. And then I worked for 2 years at the Rhode Island Supreme Court with the Chief Justice Attell. So he's the chief of the Rhode Island Supreme Court. So that is essentially all of the appeals of the state are heard. It's the only appellate court in the state. Unlike, some bigger states have the intermediate appellate court, not in Rhode Island. So from, Superior Court, any appeals, administrative appeals that go to Superior come to the Rhode Island Supreme Court. And then my last clerkship was with the First Circuit Court of Appeals with Judge Thompson, who I had interned with when I was actually a 2L, so everything kind of came full circle.
That's actually a great segue, Leticia. What things did RWU Law help prepare you for a clerkship? Like, what things did we do? That's very
Well, I always say with clerking, essentially your job is to research and write for judges, right? So writing is like the most important thing. And, the first year writing courses absolutely prepared me, in all the writing courses throughout my 3 years at Roger Williams, but more specifically, my judicial externship, which is something that I did with Judge Thompson's chambers. It was my first experience working with a judge. I didn't really know what it would entail. I didn't know what chambers looked like, what a day-to-day life of a law clerk was. And having that experience, which I actually did for a full year. So it took me through my spring semester, the full summer, and a fall semester, which is a little bit unique, but a lot of students do one semester or the summer. But having that experience really solidified my interest in being a law clerk, and it absolutely helped open doors once I was applying, which was my 2L summer. When I was applying for a post-graduation job, at that point I had worked with the judge, had her trust in me and my work product and my sort of professional demeanor. And so, having that essentially, it would have been, it was invaluable, right? It just sort of opened doors for the clerkships that came ahead.
So I will take a little bit of a different aspect than Leticia and not focus so much on the actual classes in law school, but how Roger Williams, I guess it's a career development department or pretty much, or Chris, I think when you were there, it was wherever that office was where Jody was, walking on the left. That's you, right? All right, cool. So I think that Roger Williams, the admissions office, career development, whatever you want to call it, is the resources that they, provide me with even applying to the clerkship. I don't know about other states. I know Rhode Island, they have like a clerkship pool, and I don't know anything about that. I can only speak upon New Jersey. It's got like a portal. You got to create a username. You got to upload things. It's very different than other states. And many would think, a law school in Rhode Island wouldn't be, keen on how to navigate this process. That couldn't be more untrue. I'll talk about Jody Haley specifically. She helped me out through the whole process. If it wasn't for her, I honestly probably wouldn't have figured it out. I might have just gave up, to be completely frank with you guys. But definitely utilize the office. Go ask questions. Say where you're from, whether you're from Texas, New Jersey, California, it doesn't matter where. go speak to somebody. I highly recommend Jody and Chris because I know them, I would say personally. Go speak to them, tell them what you're interested in. And, even not even just applying. I remember talking to Jody about even doing a clerkship. I said, what does a clerkship really entail? You think it's for me? You kind of know my personality, my grades. You think that this is something that would be, good for me? Of course, I would say certainly worked out. And I say to everybody, and I'm sure I'm going to say 5 more times throughout this, I guess, presentation, you could call it. I would not be in the position I am, and I wouldn't be practicing law in the manner I am without my clerkship. And I tell this to everybody, if you have the opportunity, if you could do it financially, if you could do it physically, mentally, just do the clerkship. If you're thinking about it, I highly recommend it. Jump into it. And hopefully you get a great judge like I did too, which I think also helps because I've heard horror stories. So I don't want to scare anybody, but if you get a good judge, it's really an invaluable experience.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, Chris, I'll jump in and could definitely agree with everything Marco said. Like, it's one of those things that it really is a unique opportunity for you after law school because, you can practice, you can have a 30, 40-year career, but it's a pretty, small scope of time where you can actually be in a judge's chambers and see how things are sort of done behind the scene. And that's why it's really invaluable, regardless of what area of the law you want to practice. Sometimes it's a direct correlation, right? So like clerking in a criminal court, now sort of that's the practice area. I have, a good friend of mine who clerked in an immigration court and is now a practicing immigration attorney. For me, it wasn't that, isn't the comparison's a little bit different because my clerkships for the most part were appellate. So I saw a little bit of everything. But in many ways, it shaped me as the attorney I am today because, it's the writing skills, the analytical skills. It's really seeing how judges process the different cases before them. And so in my day-to-day, when I get a new assignment, it brings me back to like, all right, how am I going to tackle this? Because essentially especially when you're at the appellate level, you get a range of subject areas and you're going to get an appeal from 2 really strong attorneys arguing like, I'm right, no, I'm right. And by the end of that assignment, you should know more of the law than they do in this subject area. So you really go from like, I've never heard of this to like, here's a draft opinion on how this case should come out. And sort of that exercise is just like a skill that is really important to have, right? To being like, I don't know this law, but I know how to research. And that's what law school does, right? It teaches you to like, when you don't have the answer, you know how to find the answer. And that skill sort of like trickles down for the rest of your career because we're never going to know the answer just like in our minds, right? Like we have to like know the skills to look it up. And that's essentially like clerking is in many ways, at least for me, was like a continuation of like honing the skills that I learned at Roger Williams.
Great. Thank you both. Yes. And to Marco's point as well, yes, we are Rhode Island's only law school, but we do have graduates clerk across the country. I think we've had someone clerk in probably almost most states, especially on both coasts. But yes, if you're not a Rhode Islander, don't plan to stay here, we definitely can help you like find those opportunities, especially if you want to be in New Jersey. There are a lot of clerkships there, like 500 there. It's great. And people have a good time. So I guess you both kind of touched on this, but just to be clear, are you both glad that you did do a clerkship before your career?
Leticia, me to start or?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, sure.
I might have just answered this one.
All right, cool. As I stated, I don't think it's a secret that I'm a huge supporter of clerkships. I think I don't know any other way to put it besides the fact that there's probably no better way to start your career. Like I said, if you could do it, do it. And I'm gonna talk a little bit on a different aspect. Not only do you get to hone in on lawyering skills, writing, I think that the major part of clerkships and the most valuable thing is you're getting a sneak peek behind the curtain, right? Like you're getting to see what's going on behind the doors because it's whether you're a litigator, you're not a litigator, courts are involved, judges are involved. As a clerk, you get to see what's really going on back there. You get to see how they interact with their staff, how they interact with their sheriff's officers. You get to see what they say when they get a certain brief or in a certain way, or how they feel about certain attorneys, or how you should act as an attorney. So I think that the number one takeaway for me is it really teaches you how to be a lawyer, not the writing aspect, but more of how to carry yourself as a lawyer. And I'm not saying of what's your stereotypical lawyer, what's not. I'm just saying how to conduct yourself in a proper way in a courtroom, how to introduce yourself, how to meet people. That's another great thing. You meet so many lawyers, so many different attorneys. You meet so many different people, and your job opportunities kind of just blow up. Because it's like, if you're in the courtroom every day, after clerking, I knew I wanted to stay in criminal, and that's kind of how I ended up at the prosecutor's office, because I kind of fell in love with criminal law watching it every day. I met so many different prosecutors, defense attorneys, and before you know it, it's kind of like, oh, hey, do you have a job after this? What are you doing after this? So that's another great aspect. But I think one other thing I want to speak about is watching these attorneys away when they submit their briefs and how they conduct themselves in the courtroom, how they address the court. Because I couldn't imagine stepping into court as, say, my first day as a prosecutor and not clerking, because I feel like I wouldn't even know, the right way to address the court. So this isn't what you see. And then when you go in chambers, the judge is kind of like, depending on your judge, they might make smart comments like, did you see how he or she, or they said this, or how this was submitted? So you kind of learn like what judges want and what they don't want. So that's why I said it's a peek behind the curtain, in the sense that moving forward, then you'll know when you're submitting your brief, we'll submit an extra copy or submitted this early. And then you already have a step ahead from attorneys that never clerked before. And also you make a lot of connections. You'll meet all the secretaries. You'll meet all of the sheriff's officers. So if you need to get something done, or you need to get in touch with the judge's chambers, hey, it's Marco, we met. It's one of those things where like I'm speaking criminal aspect, mostly civil, I don't know as much, but for criminal, if you're a criminal clerk, you kind of meet all of the judges, everybody in the building, where everybody will recognize your face and name then. And New Jersey's, I would say, definitely a little bit bigger than Rhode Island, but it's not a huge state. But the legal community is, I would say, a pretty small, tight-knit community where everybody kind of knows each other. And when you clerk, you always have it under your belt that you clerked for a judge. Oh, hey, what judge did you clerk for? I clerked for XYZ judge. That's how you build a connection. Bar associations. I could do this for hours. I could literally do this for hours. And I don't know about Rhode Island or other states. However, a lot of even primarily private law firms won't even hire you unless you clerk for a judge in New Jersey. And if you want to be going to a huge firm making a ton of money, a lot of them require a clerkship. Or if you want to be an assistant prosecutor like myself, they really only hire clerks, prior clerks, unless, literally nobody's applying. That never happens. So I think it's invaluable. I'm going to pass over Leticia because I could do this for hours.
Well, I'll try not to repeat too much of what you said, but I completely agree. Just from a marketing standpoint, it opens many opportunities. There are employers that require, they're looking for certain things on a resume, whether if it's not a clerkship, maybe law review, but a clerkship absolutely opens the doors. There are extremely competitive jobs out there that having a clerkship in your resume will distinguish you from somebody who's just graduating and trying to get a job, because they know that 1 year you learned a lot. It's essentially like you have another year of law school under your belt, with like the practical aspect of it that Marco touched upon, which you don't learn in school, right? Of like, how do I address the clerk? How does this judge like things to be filed? The like sort of the day in, day out practice of the law, they know you have that from your clerkship experience. So 100%, like it literally can only open doors. And so I also feel very passionately that it's a great idea for everybody who can, if they can do it, to absolutely apply. And like, I also wanted to, it goes back a little bit to the previous question of like how the, law school, helped prepare us. But I will say, everybody comes from a different background, and you might be listening to this and you may have grown up with parents who are lawyers, with judges in the family, and that's amazing. But for myself, that wasn't my experience. So like I'm like first generation to go to college, to go to law school, and Roger Williams played a key role in sort of also letting me have this sort of prestigious opportunity, even though I didn't have like these connections, if that makes sense, right? Like I didn't have connections with the bar. I didn't know any lawyers. And I feel like the time that I spent clerking sort of like made up for that, if that makes sense. Like it propelled my career in a way, and I definitely am very appreciative to the school, for having encouraged me to apply and having like believed in me. And I think and that just talks about like it shows the school's like commitment to the students and sort of our careers, and clerking just one of many examples where I feel like Roger Williams is really good about like not just for the 3 years you're there, but also investing in the time after you graduate. And also for me, because I went to law school not necessarily knowing what area of the law I wanted to practice. Like I knew in undergrad that I wanted to pursue like continue schooling. I knew I liked to research, to write, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. And really only after I started law school did I was like, okay, I actually do want to be a lawyer. But for me, even after graduating, I wasn't sure what kind of law I was going to be practicing. And so clerking also gave me like a buffer year, if that makes sense, or like more time to decide, because I wasn't out in the market applying for a very specific job in a specific area of the law. Instead, I was I was learning a little bit of every area of the law that you can think of, so that almost like it prolonged the inevitable of like, which kind of lawyer am I going to be eventually? But it was really good because it also helped sort of boost my resume, so that like when I was applying for a job, I could say, I clerked, and if it was a criminal position, right? So I could say, well, I worked on matters involving X, Y, and Z. If it was a family court thing, I could say I worked on matters involving. So either way, I could, because I had such a range of subject areas that I worked during those 4 years of clerking, that it really, I think, improved my resume and opportunities to get a job afterwards.
Kristen, if I could just touch upon one thing that Leticia brought up, and I'm happy you did. I know this can be extremely, so some of you may be watching this and it seems overwhelming. I'm like, well, I don't know how to do this or that. Like Leticia, I am first generation as well. So, both my parents from Italy, my dad worked construction. So like, I didn't have anybody really turn to and say, like, there are a lot of law students that, their parents are attorneys or they have attorneys in their family where they bounce ideas off of. I never had that. And starting with Roger Williams as a school, I think that the school itself filled that gap of not being able to bounce questions off of somebody in my family, but the school was very, committed to helping me, as a person, a lawyer, a aspiring lawyer. So I think that, if you're watching this, you feel overwhelmed, or like, well, my parents aren't lawyers. I don't know anything about a clerkship. Go seek out the help at school. Certainly help you out. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know I wanted to do a clerkship until I probably shouldn't even say that, Chris might get mad. In my 3L year, it was a last minute thing. I had nothing lined up. Then when I started looking into it, things kind of, unfolded, and it all worked out for me. But don't feel like you can't clerk if you don't have some type of lawyer in your family. It is, I would say a clerkship is definitely prestigious. I think Leticia used that word, and I would completely agree. Not everybody could do it, and not everybody gets hired. I mean, in New Jersey, I know that I was interviewing against maybe 10, 15 other applicants. So it is hard to get. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It certainly is hard to get. And if you do get it, it's a big deal, for lack of a better term. So I don't want you to feel like, you feel like you don't deserve to be a law clerk or work for a judge because you have no lawyerly background, or whatever that means. Certainly go out there and do it. And I think that when you go on these interviews, you be straightforward with that judge, and you say, listen, I was a little bit nervous. I don't really have any attorneys in my family, and however, I'm willing to learn. I want to be here. Make it clear that you want to be there. That's another thing about interviewing for clerkships. Don't go in there and be lackadaisical, whether you're shy or not. You go in there and you make it clear that you want to be there. Because I remember when I was with my judge and we were interviewing the clerk for after me, how many times did an applicant come in and they took a lackadaisical approach and they didn't make it clear that they wanted to be there? I'm sure they did, but they might have felt a little bit nervous. Then the girl that got hired after me, she literally told the judge, like, I know somebody clerked for you. I want to work for you. I want to be. I have other applications out, but if I'm afforded the opportunity, I will accept yours over anybody else's. He hired her. So be, deliberate with your interviews with judges, because some judges are very impatient. They want to get straight to the point. And that's all I can really say. I don't want to talk too much about how to interview right now, because I don't think that's what we're here to do. But go out there and do the clerkship. Don't feel like it's not for you. I don't care who you are or where you're from or anything like that. It's certainly for everybody. And if you're worried about it, just do it anyway, and it'll be good. I promise.
Let's see. Any other final thoughts? I feel like that was Marco's.
No, I will sign. I will sign at the bottom of everything you said. I agree. It's just go out there. I know if you're listening to this, you're early on in your career. Just you just got accepted to the law school. So again, congratulations on that. You have years ahead, but it's something to start thinking about. And as you decide on school too, like okay. There are career options that are out there. There are, clerkships that are out there, and you're looking at the school that you're going to be at, like finding a school that's going to support you, not just for the 3 years, but, in your application and in your career going forward. So wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you. Yes. And we do, pride ourselves on our infrastructure to help people become clerks with first summer internships with the federal judiciary, the externship program that Leticia was part of, as well as our Office of Career Development. We are constantly talking about clerking, and that it usually means a good chunk of our graduates end up clerking, usually around like 20-ish%. And so of our employed graduates. So I just want to thank so much Leticia and Marco for coming and sharing your experiences and wisdom about clerking to our potential new students. And thank you both so much. We all appreciate you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Also, if anybody has any questions, concerns, want to ask me anything about what I said, my name is somewhere in my Zoom box. I'm sure you can find me on LinkedIn, message me, wherever. Or you can even reach out to Chris and he'll provide you with my email address, phone number. I'm more than happy to speak with anybody about clerkships, law school in general. If you're from New Jersey and you're looking to get hooked up with, a clerkship or a job, certainly reach out to me. I'm more than happy to speak.
Absolutely. And same thing here. If anybody has any questions, any follow-ups, please reach out. I'd be happy to discuss.
Thank you both. So.
Thank you all so much. This was such an amazing and insightful event. I'd like to thank everyone for coming and participating and sharing all of your great knowledge with us. Thank you so, so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. You as well.